I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Kyle Grappone. Kyle is a clarity coach who brings clarity, direction, and accountability to people's lives. He focuses on career changes, side hustles, and starting new businesses. He's also a branding strategist and author. Today, I want to find out from Kyle what hinders people from finding the career that suits them best. Join me in my conversation today with Kyle Grappone. I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Kyle Grappone. Good evening, young man.
Thank you.
Kyle, thank you for coming on. We were just having a little chat about our points of reference, the podcast, your book, knowing that there's some similarities. Can you give us an idea of what you're doing now? And then I'd like to bring you back.
Sure. So basically, what I'm doing now is I'm working with entrepreneurs and small business owners, and I work with them on what's called branding strategy, content strategy, and really just acting as their creative director. And what I mean by that is there are a number of people who have some sort of idea that they want to launch. They want to start their own business because they have a product or service they want to sell, or perhaps they want to be their own boss. They're dissatisfied with corporate America, they're dissatisfied with their job, and they've decided that they want to be a business owner, be an entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it. And what I've learned and who I help is the people who know what they want to do, but they don't know what their messaging is. They don't know what their value is. They don't know how to come up with the constant funnel of social media posts or blog posts, or how to basically take this product and create a full marketing campaign behind it. Because you could sell water bottles, and they could be great water bottles, but how do you create content? How do you find out who's going to buy that water bottle? How do you figure out where do they get their information? um, and a lot of the clients I work with are also some type of coaches or individuals who want to help people with a certain idea, so they coach. But then what about a subscription service? What about courses? What about content? What about free content versus paid content? So that's basically what I do. And as I mentioned, offline to you earlier, this really all started when I wanted to help students. I wanted to help students live a more fulfilling and satisfactory life and career and future. So now I'm working with a group of people who have taken that first step to do that and are now trying to explore, what it really looks like and what do they have to do next.
Kyle, in my limited experience, whether in my own life or with this podcast, I found people with a drive similar to you had a pretty good upbringing in that they were entrepreneurial or they started work a little early. What would have been your very first job, and how old were you when you maybe first got out of the house to make some money?
So my first job was at 15. I worked at McDonald's,
Nice.
and it did not last very long because I was the low man on the totem pole, so I didn't get a lot of hours.
Hmm.
So I quickly moved on to a job where I was a busboy at a Greek restaurant on Long Island, and I worked there for a while. Um, and then eventually I went to work for a supermarket for a number of years. And I liked the supermarket because I had a lot of coworkers, and you also had a consistent, you know, batch of hours every week.
Why did you get out of the house at 15 to work at McDonald's?
Honestly, I think it was because I was reaching a point where I wanted to make my own money. Where I came, the house I came from, we were certainly not poor, not even remotely close to that. But we weren't. I didn't grow up super wealthy. So when you reach the age of 15, some people, some kids at 15, 16, they just get money from their parents and that's how they live. And I think
Mhm.
that kind of can be crippling. But with me, my parents were like, it wasn't like I had to go work, but it was like, listen, like, you're 15 now, it's time for you to get a job, to have your own money to spend on things. So you're not asking us for money. So that's really kind of how it started, was just, you know, wanting to have my own money and not wanting to depend on my parents.
Can you speak a bit? I'm sure that you've done some research in this, especially with your book that you had, but although you've pivoted to the next step about what you just mentioned of giving money to children or your children can be a little crippling.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting interesting point that I think we see a lot, and it's money, but it's also um, objects that we give our
Hmm.
children. It's I don't know exactly what word I'm looking for. I'm thinking like cars and vacations
Tangible
and stuff
things.
like that.
You mean like a
Tangible things.
500 or $1,000 telephone, cell phone,
Yeah, like a cell phone, and then paying for their cell phone bill,
and they
paying
drop
for
it,
their car
and then they just give
insurance.
them a new one?
Exactly. Or, getting a car. I knew a guy he's older now. I won't go too much into it, but he got into a he's my age, got into a car accident, because he was, intoxicated. And his dad, even at my age, his dad bought him a brand new car afterwards. And I
I
was
got
just like, to me, I was like, this is a problem that obviously for him has gone on for generations. But to go back to your original point, it's a problem because they're not understanding consequence. If you've always had money given to you, if you've always had a full bank account, then you don't appreciate what it's like to earn. I mean, I grew up, I mean, again, I always had the essentials. I always had healthy food, I always had clean clothes, I always had a loving home. But I remember when I was younger, payday was every Thursday, and every Wednesday I was broke because I
mm,
didn't make a lot of money and I spent it. So now that I run my own business, I can appreciate the fact that, hey, money might be flowing now, but let's calm down because money's not always going to be flowing.
mm,
And what happens is that you have kids who spend their whole lives getting all of this money, all of these tangible items, getting a brand new car. I mean, if the only thing you've ever known is a brand new car, why would you ever appreciate, having a car, because you think
mhm.
that that's just how life is. Like, I remember when I worked in a very glamorous advertising agency in New York City, and I came from a couple of pretty crappy jobs. So every day was like, heaven for me because I was like, wow, I really appreciate this. But then there was this batch of kids who straight out of college went straight into this job, and they bitch and moan because they didn't know any better. They didn't know, like, this is not how it is everywhere. Like, you guys should go, like, this should not be your first job. Like, everybody's first job should be a shitty job because then you appreciate what you have. And like you said, I mean, these kids who grow up and never have a job during high school and always have money, all of a sudden they go out into the real world. And I mean, I see a lot of what the problem with a lot of 20 somethings is: they live at home, their parents pay all their bills, so they have no motivation to do well at work. And it's like, why do I have to be here? I don't need this money. Like, I worked with somebody who, her parents paid all of her bills, and she just had no motivation. You saw it because she was like, why am I doing this? Why should I do this?
Kyle, do you
And
have a solution or some tips for parents on a better way than just giving, giving, giving to their children?
I think you have to think about what you're giving them, because if
Mhm,
you give them everything, you're also giving them a very difficult future. You're giving them a lot of heartache and a lot of stress. Because what you're doing is you're crippling them. You're doing it for life. There was a very famous scene that I talk about from the movie Remember the Titans,
mhm.
where basically it was, as you know, the movie. There was Herman Boone, who was the white coach, and Herman Boone was the black coach. Yost was the white coach, and Yost basically pulled one of the black players aside and told him everything's going to be okay. You're all right. Don't worry about it. And afterwards, Herman Boone said to him, he goes, listen, you can't coddle these kids. Regardless of race, you can't coddle them, because if you
Mhm.
do that, he goes, the world doesn't care how sensitive they are. The world's going to come crashing down on them. So you think you're helping them, but you're crippling them for life. And that's what I would say to parents. Like, if you truly love your kids, you have to withhold some of that. You can't give them everything, because if you give them everything now, you're giving them a very hard time later on. So when they hit 15 or 16 years old, that's when the time is to start to get a job. When it's time to get a car, absolutely give them something safe and reliable. But if you're going to buy a new car, buy it for yourself and give them the older car.
Mhm,
Don't buy your kid a new car. Like, if you have the money to buy a new car, buy it for yourself. Because first of all, you deserve it. You're the adult. You're the one that works and makes the money, and give them the older car and make them do, you know, their chores and earn an allowance, and make them have a job, and make them, understand what it's like to drive. My first car was an 18-year-old car. So when I bought my brand new car 2 years ago, I appreciated it.
mhm.
So that's my suggestion to parents, is really kind of think about the long term, because I think a lot of parents grew up with very strict parents and now they've gone the opposite way. And the problem is you're creating kids that have no idea how to operate in the real world. They don't know conflict resolution. They don't know how to communicate with people, and there's a whole other avenue about social media I could go into about that. But I think that's my biggest suggestion to parents is just think about what you're doing because if you coddle them now, you're really hurting them later.
It reminds me of when I was home in Canada. I worked for a company, and then we dealt with a lot of university students, and there was an international student, and he had a Mercedes Benz, and somehow, some way, he went home to his home country and came back and couldn't find his car. So he went to the dealership where he just bought this car not too long before. And they're like, yeah, I want another one of those Mercedes Benz. And they're like, and his English was just a little bit off. So like, whoa, 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 whoa. Explain, where's your other car? Oh, I went home. I came back. It was gone. So the guy was kind enough, the dealer, to try to do some research and find out where his car went. And what happened was he parked in a no parking zone and it got towed
Mhm.
away. So they went and found his car, but the kid was, oh, I lost my Mercedes. I'll just go buy buy
And that's insane because it doesn't work like that. That's a crazy story, but I believe it. I absolutely believe it.
Kyle, for you, and I guess moving into the supermarket that got you maybe into high school, what were you thinking for your education and how were you trying to map out your career?
So I will tell you, I'm a very cautionary tale because I didn't really think about any of that in high school. I was very much the class clown. I told a lot of jokes, never really took anything too seriously. I think part of me knew that a lot of what I was learning in high school I was never going to use again, and I am correct on that. But I don't think I understood that you have to play the game a little bit and
Hmm.
that you do have to build the habit of studying and getting good grades. So for me, I always did okay, got some C's and some B's, but I never really thought about what I wanted to do when I grew up. And had I thought about it, I would have realized that, I shouldn't be in an office. I shouldn't be in a cubicle. I should be working with, basically working in a creative environment. And I always tell people that if I had realized it, I probably would have, been a journalism major and I'd probably be working, as a producer on a show or something because those guys are always creating and moving around. But I never really took high school very seriously and never really took college very seriously. And the end result was I got thrown into a world that I knew nothing about. And my resume sucked and my cover letter sucked and I had no experience. And I found my way out of it. But the version of me that's talking to you today is a complete 180 from 20 years ago, 15 years ago,
Hmm.
even 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, the version I am now is very different because I finally, a little later on in life, realized what I should be doing.
It was something that took me a while to figure out. Maybe everyone knows it in the back of their mind, but you mentioned learning to play the game, more the educational game. Can you speak about that? Because I think it's important for people to understand, a lot of people are doing something. Some people are envious of other people going to school and how well they're doing, but some of those people just figured out it is a game. You got to check these boxes if you want to get to some other place. And it's not for everyone, but a lot of people don't realize it really is a game.
I think it's a game in a sense that a lot of what you, if you're in high school, a lot of what you learn, you may never really use again. But if you get a D in science, then you might not get into the college you want. And if you don't get into the college you want, then you might not be able to pursue the career that you want. So it's kind of like these building blocks of even though you're not interested in certain subjects, even though you know you're never going to use them, you have to get those good grades because those good grades will get you into the college that you want.
But
And the
I'm going to
college,
stop you right
yeah.
there, Kyle, because I'm thinking of myself who is an idiot, was an idiot, and someone hears you saying, get good grades. Oh, okay, I'm done. I got to cover my ears. But what I realized, and it took until university, is getting good grades basically consists of just going to class and doing the bare minimum, which will end up being pretty good grades. some people, I mean, we're talking about a whole spectrum of people, but generally speaking, if you go to class, don't miss class, and do the bare minimum of the homework, you're going to get a B. You're going to get a B plus maybe, right? You can do that. So the idea of getting a good grade for some people, it's like, oh, well, of course, Kyle, if I just get the good grade, I'll be good. But it's not that hard if you just put in the bare minimum of effort.
Yeah, but the bare minimum of effort is still effort, right? Because if
Yeah.
you go, if you go to class, but you don't pay attention and you don't do the homework, if you don't pay attention, you don't do well on the test, like you're not going to get the good grade. So it's not incredibly difficult to get good grades, but I think some people think that if I just sit here, that's enough. And you actually do have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the other thing is that, we could, and this is not why I come on the show, but you there's a systemic issue with the education system, and we all see it, and we all know it, and there's nothing we can really do about it. And I'm not gonna die. That's not my hill to die on. I'm not gonna
Mm-hmm.
try to change the education system in this country, but there is that issue of you know taking classes that maybe you don't necessarily need, going to college maybe you don't necessarily need to go. I know one of the hip things to do now is people, especially these influencers and these big time entrepreneurs, kind of tend to shit on college and say, you don't need it, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. And I think that that's a very oversimplification of the idea. I think what we need to do is we need to kind of rethink the way we approach the idea of college and realize that it's for some people and it can be incredibly valuable, but it's not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't necessarily need to go to a high price school. You don't necessarily need to go to college. There are a lot of other avenues to go down, because the problem is like everybody's in high school is being told you have to go to college. You have to get a good degree to get a good job. And that doesn't work like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we need to say like college is a option. And for some people it's a very valuable option, but for some people it's not the right option at all.
What did you take in college? I don't know if I got that.
So I was a public relations major.
Okay.
And again, I didn't really never thought about the long term. And that's one of the reasons I started talking to students, was to help them realize that everything you do needs to be pivoted towards the type of person you want to become, the type of future that you want, because otherwise you're going to end up like a lot of these people who, you know, became adults and got jobs they didn't like. And now all of a sudden they don't really know what they want to do.
When, Kyle, did your itch develop for being a clarity coach and helping people? Because you wrote a book, so you're looking at a few years ago. You're not that old. So where did that start?
So I would say it probably started as a couple epiphany moments that I talk about. So I think one of them was back in 2013. I graduated college in 2010. So I graduated in a recession. Nobody was hiring entry level people. I knocked around a few,
Were
random
you
jobs
looking
for.
for a PR job?
I was looking for a PR job. I was also looking for a marketing job, something entry level to kind of learn that skill. Nobody was really hiring anybody in entry level. Everything I was seeing, they wanted 2, 3 years experience, just because they didn't have the money to really hire a lot of people. So
Mhm.
I spent a few years, bouncing around different jobs that didn't have to do with my major. And then in 2013, I got a marketing job, and I didn't like it. And I was very deflated because I was like, I spent so long trying to get this job, and now I don't like it. So that was kind of the first one. I was like, maybe something's wrong. And then I would have these moments where I would sit at a cubicle, especially during the summer when things are going on and the weather's so beautiful outside. And I'd be saying to myself, this isn't right. I shouldn't be sitting in this cubicle. I shouldn't be working in an office. Like, this is not what I should be doing. And I remember distinctly back in 2015, a coworker of mine, we were so fed up with just everything going on in our company that we walked out. Now, granted, we walked out around lunchtime, so it wasn't that dramatic. It just looked like two people going to lunch. But we walked out. It was in New York City. We walked down the street to a rooftop bar, and like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were drinking beers. And because we had to remember that day, we had just had it. And I remember sitting on that rooftop bar. I remember looking up. I know exactly where I was. I remember the building I was looking at. And I remember saying, there has to be more to life than this.
Mm,
And she kind of agreed with me, but I don't think she really knew what I was talking about. And I was like, there has to, for me, there has to be more to life. There has to be something else that I'm not doing. And I don't know what that is. And basically, I had this epiphany back in 2017 where I was like, you know what? One, I don't want to work a job anymore. I don't want to work in corporate America. I don't want to work for one person. I want to work for myself. I want to create things. I want to sell things. I want to help people. I want my days to be impactful. I don't want to be stuck in meetings. I don't want to be doing, stupid assignments for the sake of doing them. And that's really when I started doing the public speaking, talking to students, because I wanted students to not repeat the mistakes that I
mm.
made. And then when that wasn't working, I wrote the book. And then when that wasn't working, I did the coaching. So what I was doing was I was learning a lot about speaking. I was learning a lot about running a business. I was learning a
But
lot
you're
about all these
saying
things.
you're saying when that wasn't working, but really it's, I mean, depending if you're optimistic or pessimistic, is as you're going along, you're getting that experience, then you're writing a book, and that sort of way, rather than, well, that didn't work and that didn't work and that didn't work. Would you not look at it a little bit more optimistically and say, well, then I did this one after another?
I think, yes, I think there is the way of looking at it that everything I've done has led me to this point. But I think the way I'm trying to explain it is that the reason I wrote the book
Mm-hmm.
originally was because I wasn't getting speaking engagements, and I thought a book would be a great way to introduce myself to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
decision makers. And then the reason I started coaching was because it was difficult to get booked as a speaker, but as a coach, I could go directly to a parent and get booked and kind of cut
Mm-hmm.
out that, middleman and reach a decision maker. So long term, I think all of that brought me to where I am today. But every step I've made is because I've learned, and then I've kind of pivoted, and then I've moved on. And then, like I said, I believe it was offline,
Yes.
before we started recording, was I was finding I was getting a lot of positive feedback from people in their 20s and 30s who were basically saying, like, hey, can you create some content for me? For people who are in the real world, and now that I want to make a course correction, I want to make a career change. So that's when I kind of found myself leaving the education space and talking more to people in their 20s and 30s and 40s about starting a side hustle, about starting your own business. And at the same time, I was discovering that I was really good at branding and being creative. And I was making a lot of connections with entrepreneurs and small business owners. And I found that there was this market of people who, had kind of taken my advice without even hearing from me. They basically decided that they wanted more in life. They wanted to start their own business. And now they needed that help to kind of take it to that next level. So it's kind of been this journey, which has now brought me to, the current iteration of my company.
So in your company now, what is a process that you go through for a week, say, and what is it you do in your work?
So my process is we have different types of clients. So basically, what we're always trying to do is we're trying to work with the entrepreneur, the small business owner, and help them basically craft their message through content, through branding strategies, and basically help them build their business to the point where they're making consistent income and consistent revenue, and eventually put them on a path where they can leave their full-time job someday, or if they have already done that, they can build their business and they can expand their business. So my clients can vary. I have clients that all we do right now is write 2 blog posts a month. And we write those blog posts and we talk about what are the topics and what's the call to action and who are we writing for. But where we really are excelling right now is working with larger entities, or more established, entrepreneurs who are either coaches or teachers, and helping them take their idea and kind of spread it out where they have their sales funnel set up, they have their videos set up, but their content is better than everybody else's because instead of just, throwing something against the wall and hoping it sticks, we've built out, their buyer personas, their target audience, their what's called a messaging matrix. So every single thing they create is based on this matrix of what pain points are you solving, What problems are you solving? Who are you speaking to? So that's really kind of what I do. And then occasionally I still do some speaking here or there. But one of the things I would say to anybody who's thinking about starting a business is you can offer a number of different things. Like you can have a website, and you can offer different things. Like I offer coaching courses and speaking, but you need to focus on one thing. Like what is the one thing you're doing right now? And then when that gets up and running and that kind of runs on its own, then you can pivot to another thing. So like, do I still speak? Yes. Do I put any kind of time and effort around it? No.
Mm.
What happens is that somebody finds me and says, hey, there's an event I'd like you to speak at.
You're in a position where you're able to help people who have made that decision, but you also have enough experience to help those people get over making a decision, whether it's starting a career, starting a side hustle, or getting that new small business going. What hinders people in your view to make those decisions? So they're, as you were on a patio in a bar, thinking there's more to life than this, and then making the decision to transition into something else. What hinders people to do that?
One of the main things that hinders people is mindset and the way their brain is wired and the way we as human as our brain is wired. And I tell my clients that your brain is there and exists to keep you safe. So whenever it sees a threat, it immediately tries to drag you away from that. And when I say the word threat, we think of the extreme example. But in reality, starting your own business is viewed as a threat
Mm.
because you could fail. You could get hurt, not physically, but emotionally. You could be ridiculed. It's unknown. Just the idea of starting a business has a lot of unknown tasks. This is why people stay at jobs for so long, even though they're miserable, because they know exactly what they have to do. It's comfortable. You can be comfortable and miserable at the same time. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but you could absolutely be very comfortable and be unhappy at the same time. And that's what happens. And that's what hinders people from taking that jump because they have to rewire their brain and they have to, say, I'm uncomfortable, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, I even find it myself sometimes. If I have a lengthy to-do list for the day and there's 5 or 6 things that even there's 5 or 6 things I've done before, and then there's 2 things I've never done before, like I take those 2 things and I try to like rationalize why I don't have to do them today because they're unknown.
Mm.
And I think that's something that I still try to get over because if I look at something and I say, oh, I have to write 3 blog posts today, and they're all for clients I've been working with for a year. Oh, no sweat. But if I have a brand new website for a brand new client and I have to go through their documents and I have to figure out what they want, that to me can get overwhelming because you don't already know what the outcome is. That's why people don't always make that change to start their own business because with a job, you know what the outcome is. You know how much money you're getting paid, you know when you're getting paid, and you really don't have to make a lot of difficult decisions. Like a lot of times the buck stops with somebody else.
Mm.
So you can, maybe slack off a little bit or maybe take some time off or whatever, but when you start your own business, you're the one that has to make the final decision. You can consult other people, but you have to make the final decision. When something goes wrong, you can't just go home at 5 o'clock and email and give it to somebody else. It's you. It's your problem. And I think people have this mindset of, you know, being scared of failing. And I think the other problem is that if you want to leave a 9 to 5 job and start your own business, you have to do both of them at the same time for a while. So
Mm.
that means working your nine to 5 job, coming home, eating dinner, and then taking that 7 to 10 or 7 to 11 block that you've spent the last 10 years in that block watching Netflix. Now all of a sudden you're going to open up the laptop and work more for no money. That's a big thing to get over. And I don't think people realize that because
Mm.
you're going home and your significant other's like, hey, I haven't seen you all day. And now all of a sudden you're going to be on your laptop and you're doing work and you're not making any money, but you have a good job. Why are you doing that? And I think that those are all things that kind of swirl around
Yep.
that people don't understand. Like I think that the big thing is you do a lot of work and you're not getting paid for it right away. And I think some people are just like, well, wait a minute, I'm doing a lot of work and I'm not getting paid. I mean, I think I worked for 2 years straight on this business and probably didn't make any money. Um, but I knew what I wanted to do, and the fear for me the fear of working in a cubicle for the next 40 years was 10 times greater
Mm.
than failing at anything. I do not fear failing. I fear having to go back and work jobs that I don't like. And I think if you can develop that type of mindset and you can look at your life and say, I'm afraid of not changing more than I'm afraid of changing. And get ready to be uncomfortable because it's a wild ride being an entrepreneur, starting your own business, or even people who want to change career paths. Like even people again, because you may have to go back to school or you may have to buy a course and take the course at night, or you may need to take a pay cut or something to change careers and kind of pivot. And I think for a lot of people, it's too uncomfortable and it's too unknown, and that's why people stick. A few years ago, I worked at a company, and I've told people out loud it's the worst company I ever worked for. Um, and I looked, and there's people there that who were miserable. And this was 4 years ago. I worked at this company. Were absolutely miserable when I was there, and they're still there at the same position. And it just blows my mind that these people who I know you're miserable, but it's comfortable and they don't ever want to leave. And I don't know. I get it to an extent, but after a while, it's like, shit or get off the pot.
It's funny. I interviewed Jeff Diskovic yesterday, who spent 16 years in prison for a wrongful conviction. And that man worked in prison to release himself, to keep his mind sane. And then he mentioned the dismay he has with people who do some of these things, having the same job, finding excuses, not doing their work, because he worked while in prison. And then he got out. I mean, in prison, he got his GED, he got his associates, he did 1 year of college, he learned about plumbing and electrical and all this, got out, did his bachelor, master's, and now he's a lawyer. He's like, time is of the essence. Don't waste your time because you never know. And his point is, for being in prison, is it could happen to you. But the idea is he would never want to go back to that. And with you, with your cubicle, you would never want to go back to that. So take, the bull by the horns and get going with your job. Is there a tip that you have for people who, like yourself, maybe going to McDonald's for the first time, going to a job, a small job, or changing careers? Do you have a tip for people who are just starting work one way or another?
So I would say for somebody who's just starting work, like a teenager, for example, who maybe is getting their first job, I think the important thing to remember is that whatever you're doing is not going to be that glamorous. And it's probably not going to be a lot of fun, but you're there to make money. You're also there to gain experience because the more you work, the more you prove to other people that you can be trusted. Some people see being a cashier at McDonald's as, a lowly job. But it's really about how you approach it. Do you
Hmm.
approach it as, oh, I'm just a cashier? Or do you approach it as, I'm trusted to handle money? I'm trusted to be the face of this franchise. Because being a cashier, is maybe not difficult, but if you can say, "Oh, I was a cashier at McDonald's for 5 years at the same place," then that proves that you're a outgoing person, you're a friendly person, you can be trusted. Because if you weren't those things, they would have stuck you somewhere else. So it's really all about gaining perspective. It's about just gaining experience. It's about also developing a work ethic, because there's going to be days where you don't want to go to work, but you do anyway because it's what you have to do. And that's what happens in the real world. We don't always get to do the things that we want to do. Sometimes we do the things we have to do. So I would say that to anybody who's starting kind of their first job. If somebody is out there and they're starting their first full-time job after college, I would tell them again to be patient. Your first job a lot of times will include things that you think an intern should be doing. You're the low man on the totem pole, so you're kind of a catch-all. But it's really about figuring out where could I go. If I stay here a year, where could I go after this? Is there a different department I could go into? What can I learn? What skills can I pick up? Is there someone here that impresses me? Maybe I could kind of, be mentored by them. But just be, positive, but also be realistic in a sense that if you're at a company and you're not learning and you're not growing, you do have a right to leave. A lot of people will say, well, you got to stay at a job for a year. And I don't agree with that. I think you should aim to stay for at least a year. But it's very reasonable to understand that you might get the wrong job. I mean, companies will say they're one thing and say this is the job, this is the company, and then you get through the door and it's a nightmare. I mean, I've gone through that a number of times, and you can't always, I wouldn't tell that person, oh, even though it's a nightmare, even though you're miserable, and even though you're not growing, you're not learning, just stay for a year. Like, I don't agree with that at all. So if you get a job and you're not growing, I'm not talking about you're not happy, but if you're not growing and you're not learning and you're just doing menial work every day, then you have the right to move on. So you got to be very careful about, are you growing? And maybe, every 6 months kind of taking your temperature and doing that type of internal audit where you're saying, what have I learned? Where am I going? What am I doing? Like that job I talked about, that terrible, terrible company, they were paying me a lot of money, but the job was, very high volume because I was a project manager. So it was very high volume, but it was very, very basic stuff. Now, a college kid couldn't handle it because they wouldn't be able to handle the volume. So
Mhm.
that's why I was hired. But I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't growing at all. I was after a week I was like, this is already stale. And that's why I only worked there for 7 months.
What about a tip for people changing careers, a little bit older?
I would say that changing careers is not as difficult as people make it out to be. And that if you really have the right mindset, your skill set can translate easier than you think. Because I know people who are like, oh, I've been in insurance my whole life and I don't want to be in, but it's the only thing I know, so I can't get a job outside of insurance. Well, wait a minute, take a step back. What do you do every day? Do you manage projects? Do you communicate with clients, communicate with customers? Do you manage numbers? Do you put together reports? What do you do? Because that skill is needed in other industries. So even if you've been an account manager in the healthcare industry, you could be an account manager at an advertising agency because you still have to deal with clients. You still have to organize and manage and monitor. So it's really about, taking your skills and showing people that they can translate and I can do that job. And the second half of that is also finding what's missing and learning it on your own. So, for example, if you're an account manager in healthcare and you want to be a an ad executive at an ad agency, you have some of those skills, but then it's also up to you to one, familiarize yourself with the world of marketing, with the world of branding, but also, and this is something that gets lost, is that if you want to change careers, you can volunteer in some aspect to learn those skills. There's a great website called Catch a Fire that basically is nonprofits looking for volunteers. And I tell people all the time, if you want, if you want to do social media marketing, go on this website and start
Wh-
doing social
What
media
was
for
it?
nonprofits.
Catch
Catch a fire.
catch
So
a
it's
fire?
yeah, catch a fire. Um, and I tell people, I said, you can do social media for these nonprofits because one, any kind of help is great, and you can kind of use them kind of as a test project, and learn and you can take a free course on social media marketing and then take what you learn and immediately put it towards the nonprofits. Now the nonprofit is getting some help, you're getting some help. So it's really about just being creative and changing careers. But I will say that the older you get, the more difficult it's going to be because you have more responsibilities. Um, if you're 25 years old and you have a girlfriend and you don't think you like your career, change now because 5 years from now you're going to be married with a house and kid, and now all of a sudden it's going to be a lot more difficult.
Mm.
And I think that's what some people don't realize is like they almost like society almost treats life like a grocery list where like you're supposed to graduate college, get married, buy a house, have a kid, and that's what you're supposed to do. And the problem is that you blink, and in 5 years you've done all that, and now you have all these people that are relying on you,
Mm.
and it's not impossible. But now you can't take a pay cut. See, like when you're 25 years old, if you're making 50K and you find a job that you love, but it's going to be 40K or 38K or whatever, you can probably take a pay cut. You might have to sacrifice some things that you probably didn't need in the first place, but by the time it's time to buy that house, you'll be back up to that number. But if you're like me, I mean, I'm 33 years old. I have a house, a kid. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't take a 20K pay cut.
Mm.
So I don't want to say certain people are stuck, but
The older you get, it
yeah,
gets a little bit more difficult.
yeah.
You mentioned skill. Is there a skill as a clarity coach and a branding strategist, or even as an author, that you had to develop and to improve? What would that be?
So I think one of the skills was learning why people buy products,
Mm.
why people purchase, and understanding kind of consumer behaviors. So I think that's something that I had to learn.
Did
Um,
by learning that, did that change your own behavior or give you a better idea as to why you make the decisions you do?
it definitely did. It definitely did because I can see through a lot of BS. Um, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to sell me their services.
Mm.
And a lot of times I read it and I go, yeah, that's because what I can pick on is like they'll say something that's not true. Like they'll say, email marketing is dead, so you have to do this. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like that's not true. But you're hoping that I don't know that. Or they'll say, in 2000, if COVID taught us anything, it's that you have to be on the internet. Well, well, COVID didn't teach us that. Like we've always known that. I see a lot. I really want to think of what I saw the other day, and I was just like, no, that's not true. But it's like something like if you want to start a side hustle, then you have to have videos, a video blog. And it's like, well, no, you don't. Like you want us to because then we'll buy your product. But I was like, that's not really true. Like if they say these things to kind of hook you, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like I had a call with somebody who wanted to sell me their service. It was an expensive service, and it would kind of be me learning how to do something and then adding that to my company. And afterwards, I was like, there's something missing here. I was like, because what you're saying you can do for me, I was like, it's not that easy. So I could see through a lot of things that other people can't necessarily see through. Like my dad, for example, I always hear from my dad. He goes, I don't understand why they give so much stuff away for free. And why do all these platforms have free versions? And I'm like, Dad, I'm like, everybody's got a free version because you get into it, you like it, and then what happens? What you really need isn't free. I was like, so then you have to buy that. And I also told him, I said, the reason that you're able to download that book for free is because now they have your email address and
Yeah.
they don't know that you, Joe Grappone, is never going to buy anything from them. I was like, you're not their target audience. You're just something like you're a loss to them. Like when you get a free item from somebody, I was like, they lost money on you because you're not going to buy anything. But everybody else, they're hoping that they buy something down the road. Like that's why I see like a lot of times I'll purchase like I'll like get a free book and I know that like okay, I got to go through 8 upsells. And I know the reason I got the book is because they do all this stuff. Like the other day I bought like 3 or 4 things that were like 4 or 5 bucks. And now I'm just getting bombarded with these automated sales emails.
Mm.
And I know it because I do it myself. So it's kind of like, I read through
I
it and I'm
know
like,
what you're
okay,
doing
yeah,
there.
yeah. Yeah, everybody's got, and I try to read it and I try to be different. I try to look at them and say, what are they doing
Hmm.
and how do I make a change? Because everybody has the same formula. And it becomes white noise after a while. So I try to that's why I don't unsubscribe from those emails. I read them and I try to figure out how can mine be different.
Yeah, it's a good skill to develop the awareness, a sensitivity, what's really going on. I think of there was an ad I saw, which they did a good job. It was for a dental company or a dentist, and it showed a person wearing a mask, like a COVID mask. And they said, now is the best time, isn't it?
I know exactly. I saw that exact same ad that says never been a better time to get
Never been a
braces.
better time to embrace it. It's like, that's good. That's clever. You got to give
Yeah,
them
I like
kudos.
that. I like that one a lot. There's definitely a few. What was one the other day I saw that I really enjoyed? Oh, you know what it was? I was explaining this to my. Oh, this is what I was trying to explain this to my wife the other day. She's in a group chat. Long story. She's in a group chat. So she actually just gave birth like a week ago to our first her
Congratulations.
daughter. Thank you. So she was in a group chat with a bunch of other women who were giving birth in January. And one of the women runs her own business and she creates these handcrafted like wooden signs. And she gave everybody in the group a free sign that said, hello, my name is, and whatever the baby's name is. And my wife was like blown away by this. And she was like, she won't let us pay for shipping. She has to spend all this money on shipping. She's giving everybody for free. I can't believe it. And I said, first of all, I said, it's still an extremely nice offer to do that. I'm not taking anything away. I said, there's a couple of things you need to understand. I said, first and foremost, I said, those shipping costs now become a loss. She can write that off
Yeah.
as a loss, and your taxes are low. I was like, so even though that's nice of her to cover the shipping, I was like, not to mention people who do a lot of shipping also have a deal with UPS where their shipping is less. I learned that from corporate America. I said, the second thing is, I said, every single one of you, what did you do? You posted the picture on it. You posted the announcement photo on Instagram with that thing, and now she's going to get sales through that. I was like, so it was an incredibly nice offer, but it was also a marketing tactic. I was like, and once you understand that, you know, then you understand. Once you understand that everybody has, not everybody, but there's always that ulterior motive. Because she was like, I can't believe she gave it away for free. I was like, it's not free. I was like, because she's getting a lot of free marketing from it.
Yeah, and it's not hard. You can appreciate what people are trying to do, but you do have to have your defenses up to be aware of what's really going on. And you can't blame people because they're businesses and people are out there making money as well. So it's and on that same vein, what is a character trait that you hold in highest regard in your industry and maybe even for people in general in work?
I think being transparent and being authentic. Um, to me, I think being transparent is all about, you know, if I can help you, I'll help you. But if I can't help you, I'm going to tell you that. I think there's too many people who sell services and don't care if they can actually help the person. Um, you know, they'll anybody they talk to. Like I remember somebody was trying to sell me a service and I was like, this is too expensive. And he was like, well, let me go talk to my boss and see what I can do. I'm like, you're not talking to your boss, you're following a script. I was like, you're not authentic at all. I was like, and then he came back and goes, my boss is really impressed with your business. I was like, he has no idea who I am. I was like, this is what you do. I was like, when somebody says no, you call them back 2 days later. So I was like, you're not authentic. That's not being transparent. And I talked to somebody who's trying to sell me his service, and then he was like, listen, he goes, if you're doing this, you won't have time to do what I want you to do. And I was like, well, I appreciate that because now, I mean, you're not going to make the sale, but at least you didn't sell something to somebody who, you know, wasn't a good fit. Um, and I think also being authentic, because my problem nowadays is that I feel like a lot of people are playing a role. They're playing some sort of character. Like I always say that my problem with cable news is that I don't know who's who. Like I don't know who is actually a real person because I think all of these people on cable news just play a role that's going to get them to you know, get them viewers. Like Tucker Carlson's a great example of this. I was like, I don't get mad at the guy because I have no idea what Tucker Carlson actually believes. I just know that he has found a character to play that is going to bring in a lot of things. And the same thing goes for the guys on CNN, you know, the guys on MSNBC. I don't know what they believe, but I do know that they know that if I hit these points, that I'm going to make a lot of money. And they're basically actors. You know, it's like if Denzel Washington plays a villain and kills somebody, we don't all get up in arms and say, I got Denzel Washington's a murderer. No, he played a murderer. Like Tucker Carlson's an idiot. No, he just plays an idiot. I mean, that's all it is.
They put on their costumes before the cameras roll.
Exactly. So I think it's about being, you know, authentic. And a lot of times I can see people who are not, you know, authentic, who are trying to play, you know, a role or put something out there that really just isn't true. And I think you have to be your authentic self, especially if you're going to help people. But you know, there's only one you. I mean, I always tell people I have no desire to be anybody else, to be like anybody else, to emulate anybody else. I'm trying to be the first me. I'm not trying to be the next this person or the next that person. You know, somebody told me once, they were like, well, you just need to figure out what somebody else is doing and just copy that. I was like, well, no, because then you're them. You know, then you're a second, you're a poor man's them. You're a cheap them. You know, I'm me. You know, I have a friend who says to me a lot of times, well, you know, most people do this. And I was like, dude, I'm not most people. And I was like, that's why I do what I do and you do what you do. Because I'm not most people. I don't care. Like if you tell me like, oh, nobody does it that way. Okay, cool. That means I could probably make money because nobody else is doing it that way.
Speaking of you, Kyle, do you have an overarching goal for your coaching business or your strategy brand building business?
So my goal, I think, a personal goal of mine is to build this business to a point where we are running, I don't want to say autopilot because I'll always be involved, but get it to a point where we're creating these assets, whether they be mostly like courses or documents, templates that entrepreneurs can buy and they can fully understand what they need to do. And they can be sold kind of in the background. We can sell them through the different ways we sell things through Facebook ads, to organic outreach, and allow me to really take a step back and maybe not do so much of the one on one work, but more of the promoting my courses, promoting, excuse me, these other things, and then have the time to maybe write another book.
Hmm.
But also kind of get myself to a point where I can take a break and we're still making money. And the perfect example of this was, last Friday on, I think it was the 8th, my wife came home from the doctor and was like, we're going to the hospital because they want to, monitor me and then we're going to have a baby in a few days. So all of last week, I was in the hospital with her and I didn't get any work done. I mean, the business almost came to a halt because a lot of what I do requires me to actually do work. So it's all about kind of building up a business where if that ever happened again, we'd still be in good shape.
Wasn't that your motto, the part of life you don't see coming?
Exactly. It's, that's definitely part of it is I think that I didn't really realize that as much success as I've had, there's still a ways to go because I have to get myself to a point where it's more, you know, creating one thing that can reach 1,000 people rather than just creating one thing for one person.
Kyle, is there anything people may not understand about you so that if they're considering getting you as a coach and getting some advice from you, that if they understood this, they would have a better appreciation and understanding of you and the work that you're accomplishing?
I think one thing people have to understand when they work with me is my coaching program with you is incredibly specific to you. So when they go to my website or they see what I talk about, I can't necessarily tell you what we're going to work on because I don't know you yet. I don't have a set template for somebody to change careers. And the reason I don't have that is because everyone is different.
Mm.
I have to understand where you are. I have to understand where you want to go. And I have to understand who you are as a person because the game plan for a 22-year-old that still lives at home is totally different than the game plan for the 45-year-old with two kids. The game plan for the guy who wants to go
Kyle,
from being
can,
a
can you help me with my game plan? I'm the latter.
and it's and that's my whole thing is like sometimes people will say like, well, what's your template? What are we going to work on? Like it's a 6-week program. What do we work on each week? I'm like, I won't know that until I get to know you. And I'm also not going to know that until, we get going because we don't know what roadblocks are we going to hit? Where are we going to go? I have a client who's a police officer right now and originally he wanted to completely leave law enforcement. And his problem was he was making a lot of money and a lot of these other avenues really aren't going to give him a lot of money. So he actually left being one type of police officer and now he's still in law enforcement but doing something a little different. And we reached that when we realized that one, he'd have to stay in law enforcement to continue the salary he wanted. But two, we discovered that the problem was not, I don't want to be a cop anymore. It was, I don't want to be a cop for this entity anymore.
Mm.
So, and I never would have discovered that if we didn't go through the process that we go through.
So we have a very thorough process and it's specific to the people. As you say that, I'm thinking sometimes I'm at the airport and I'm thinking, isn't it funny how people are so, and I guess it's not negative, but people are so discontent because this person's going wants to go to the same place I just left, and the same thing with jobs, thinking of, oh, what do you mean a police officer doesn't want to be a police officer? You know how many people want to be a police officers? So all these
Mhm.
people are going from job to job and they're like, hey, I'm leaving that job. And hey, I'm going to that job, just like at an airport. Is there, thinking of in your own life, uh, is there any adversity that you have faced that either positively or negatively affects your work, but also as a point of encouragement for others who are facing adversity?
I mean, I think one of the things that I'm always trying to get over is, I didn't come from money. And the fact that I kind of was so lost in the beginning of my career that I didn't make as much money as I probably could have.
Can I
So
stop you right
now,
there, Kyle? Because I think it's a good point to ponder in that I think there's a I didn't come from money either, but I know there's this group, a club. It's kind of like a competition. Like, how poor were you really? Right?
Mhm.
You weren't as poor as me, but to say I didn't come from money, and it was a struggle, and I was lost. So if we can agree, that's a big segment of the population. So right there, what you're saying is applicable to most people. It's not, well, come on, Kyle, you had no money. Do you know how poor I was? I
Mhm.
ate, that same box, that can every day, So I'm just saying that what you're saying is applicable to most people.
No, you're absolutely right because it's like you said, it's not when we say not money, we don't necessarily mean being poor or not poor, but there's that threshold that most people don't hit. Because there are people who, are in their 20s and their parents can give them $200,000 to start a business because they've made all of this money. And it makes life a lot easier because you can buy any service you want, you could hire anybody you want. But for me, I never had that. So I had to learn a lot of things on my own. I had to, pick and choose. And anytime I want to, there's a number of things I would love to do for my business, but I can't do it right now because, every dollar is associated with something or goes towards something. So I think it's about staying true to your vision and doing what you can with what you've got and improving while you go. There's a lot of things I want to do right now. I'm focused on one or two things because that will generate income. Part of that income will go towards the next thing. And then part of that income will go towards the next thing. And things will never move as fast as I want. Um, but that's just something you have to accept.
And diapers ain't cheap.
That's also true.
Kyle, how can people reach you? What is your point of contact?
So I would say you can go straight to my website, which is tothenextstep.org. And you can fill out a form and you can get me there. Or very simply, you can follow me on Instagram, which is at Kyle G Speaks. So that's Kyle G Speaks. And you can always message me on Instagram. Starting to post more content on there, so it's a great way to kind of get in touch with me. But either way, and I offer everybody a free coaching session to start. And that's where we talk about your goals and whether or not I can help you. And
You're just
every
trying to
once in a
wheel them in, though.
you know but that's how it is, right?
It is out. Yeah.
We talk, and I've had some people that at the end of it I've said, listen, I can't help you.
Mhm.
You're not my ideal client, and I've kind of pointed them in the right direction. But most people, if you're committed to it, we can help you find that clarity that you seek.
Yeah.
It's just about being committed to it.
One final question, Kyle, and that is, why do you work?
I work to help people. I work to help people be happier, to lead better lives, to follow their visions and their dreams. And that's kind of the legacy that I'm working on. You know, 30 years from now, no one may ever remember to the next step, but people will remember all the businesses that I helped create. And I don't really care if people remember Kyle Grappone. I want people to, be impacted by the work that I did.
Kyle Grappone, clarity coach, branding strategist, author of To the Next Step. I appreciate your time that you've given me, and I appreciate the work that you do.
No, thank you for having me on. It was a great time.